Beneath the prairie of southwestern Minnesota lies a seam of soft red stone that people have traveled to for more than 3,000 years. It is called Pipestone, and from it the nations of the Great Plains have carved the bowls of sacred pipes for longer than most cities on Earth have existed. This is not a story about ruins or relics, because the quarries here are still worked today by hand, exactly as they always have been. On a cold Thanksgiving morning in late November, we are walking into Pipestone National Monument. The trail ahead passes active quarries, a waterfall carved names from an 1830s expedition, and rock formations older than almost anything else in North America. Come walk it with us. Pipestone National Monument sits at the edge of the town of Pipestone, in the far southwestern corner of Minnesota, only a few miles from the South Dakota line. The monument protects about 282 acres of tallgrass prairie, quartzite ledges, and the famous quarry pits themselves. It is one of the smallest units in the national park system, yet it carries some of the deepest human history of any of them. The National Park Service formally recognizes 23 tribal nations with ties to this ground. The walk that circles it all is called the Circle Trail, a loop of roughly 3/4 of a mile that we will stretch to about a mile today. Small in acres, immense in meaning. It is just before noon when we set out, and the prairie has already gone into its winter colors. The grasses are bleached to straw and copper, the sky is a pale November gray, and the wind has the bite of the coming season. This is Thanksgiving Day, and we have the trail almost entirely to ourselves. The path is paved and gentle, built so that nearly anyone can make this walk. Underfoot, only a few feet down, runs the red stone that made this place famous across a continent. The stone itself is called catlinite, though most people simply say pipestone. It is a claystone deep brick red, and it lies in thin layers sandwiched inside a much harder rock called quartzite. What makes it precious is its softness. Fresh from the ground, it can be cut and shaped with simple hand tools, yet it hardens with exposure and takes a fine polish. Stone with those qualities in that color is found in very few places on Earth. For the peoples of the plains, this seam became the source of the most important object they made. The Circle Trail leads north from the visitor center through the old quarry line before bending toward the creek and the cliffs. Everything worth seeing here sits along this single unhurried loop. Historical markers stand along the way, and in season the beds of prairie wildflowers bloom between the grasses. In late November it is quieter, stripped down to stone, water, and wind. That quiet suits the place, because this is not a park built for spectacle. It is a landscape people have treated as holy for a very long time. Archaeologists have found evidence that people began quarrying stone here more than 3,000 years ago. Word of the red stone spread along trade routes that crossed the continent, and pipes carved from it have been found far from Minnesota. By the time European writers first mentioned the quarries, in the 1600s, this was already among the most storied places on the northern plains. Nations sometimes at war with one another are said to have come here to dig the same stone. Generation after generation, the pits deepened, and the tradition never broke. Few places anywhere can claim that kind of unbroken use. The quarry pits appear beside the trail almost at once, long trenches in the prairie edged with piles of broken pink quartzite. Some pits are old and softened by grass, while others are clearly fresh, with straight-cut walls and neatly stacked rubble. These are not exhibits. They are active workplaces, and the tarps and timbers you can sometimes see belong to quarriers who will return. Out of respect, visitors stay on the trail and leave the pits and every scrap of stone untouched. Looking into them, you are looking at a craft in its fourth millennium. Reaching the Pipestone has never been easy, because the thin red layer lies beneath several feet of Sioux quartzite, one of the hardest rocks on the continent. Quarriers break through it with sledgehammers, iron wedges, and pry bars, striking along natural seams until the hard cap comes away in slabs. Only then can the fragile red layer be lifted out, carefully, so it does not shatter. The rules here allow hand tools only, no machinery and no explosives, so the work takes weeks of heavy labor. A quarrier today works essentially the way a quarrier did centuries ago. The effort itself is considered part of the meaning, a price paid in sweat for a sacred material. Here is the fact that sets Pipestone apart from almost every other historic site. Quarrying never stopped. Today, only enrolled members of federally recognized Native American tribes may quarry here, under permits issued by the National Park Service. Dozens of quarry pits are assigned to individual quarriers, some of whom follow parents and grandparents who worked the same ground. In the visitor center, demonstrators carve pipestone through the seasons, keeping the craft in public view. What the trail shows you is not history preserved behind glass, but history still being made. It matters to say clearly what the stone becomes. The pipe carved from catlinite is a ceremonial and religious object, central to prayer, to councils, and to the sealing of agreements among many Plains nations. Smoke rising from the pipe is understood to carry prayers upward. Because of that, the pipes are not regarded as artifacts or curios, and many carvers hold strong views about how the stone should be used and sold. The red of the stone is often spoken of in tradition as the blood of the ancestors. Whatever a visitor believes, the depth of that meaning is why this small quarry became a place nations protected for 3,000 years. Between the quarries and the cliffs, the trail crosses native tallgrass prairie, a landscape now far rarer than it once was. Tallgrass prairie once covered vast stretches of the middle of the continent, and almost all of it has been converted to farmland. The strips protected here preserve big bluestem, prairie cordgrass, and dozens of other native species. In summer, this ground hums with insects and wildflowers. In late November, it is a dry, whispering sea of stems, beautiful in a sparer way. The red stone below and the prairie above have always belonged to the same story. In Lakota tradition, the sacred pipe was brought to the people by White Buffalo Calf Woman, a holy messenger who appeared long ago and taught them to pray with it. The pipe she brought, called the Chanupa, stands at the center of ceremonies that continue to this day. Dakota and Lakota accounts of the quarries themselves speak of the stone as the flesh and blood of their people. These are living religious traditions, held by living communities, and they are shared with visitors here as teachings rather than legends. The monument asks guests to receive them with respect. Walking this ground, that request is easy to honor. Ahead of us now rises the feature that anchors the whole landscape, a long ledge of pink Sioux quartzite standing above the prairie. The rock face glows a soft rose color even under gray skies, streaked with lichen in green and black and orange. The cliff runs like a wall across the monument, and the trail bends to follow its base. After a mile of level grassland, the sudden vertical stone feels almost architectural. Every important landmark on this walk, the falls, the carved names, the stone faces, waits somewhere along this ledge. The Sioux quartzite began as sand laid down by wide braided rivers well over 1.5 billion years ago, in a world with no plants, no animals, and no soil. Time and pressure fused that sand into quartzite, one of the most durable rocks there is. The pipestone layers formed from fine clay that settled on those ancient floodplains between the sheets of sand. Later heat and pressure transformed the clay into the smooth red claystone carvers prized today. When a quarrier lifts a slab of pipestone, the material in their hands is older than almost any living landscape on Earth. Few sacred objects anywhere are carved from deeper time. Near the ledge, the trail meets Pipestone Creek, and you hear the falls before you see them. Water in this dry corner of the state is a modest thing most of the year, but the creek gathers itself here and drops over the quartzite lip in one clean plunge. Stone steps and a footbridge carry the trail right to the base. In hard winters, the falls freeze into a column of ice, and in spring they roar. On this November day, the flow is steady and cold, threading white down the pink rock. The falls are named Winnewissa, a name drawn from the Dakota language, from a word meaning to be jealous. It is often translated as Jealous Maiden, and the name has clung to the waterfall through every change this landscape has seen. Dakota names survive all across this ground, on the falls, on the lake south of the monument, and on the stone itself in translation. That endurance is fitting. The names are a reminder that this was a named, known, storied landscape long before any surveyor arrived. To walk here is to walk through someone else's ancient geography. Winnewissa Falls drops about 20 feet over the Quartzite Ledge, and up close it fills the whole notch in the cliff with sound. The pool below is dark and clear, ringed with tumbled pink boulders. It is a small waterfall by any measure, yet in hundreds of miles of farmed prairie it feels almost miraculous. Photographers come from across the region for this single drop of water. We linger on the footbridge, letting the camera take it in. Then the trail climbs beside the falls toward the top of the ledge. In September of 1836, the American painter George Catlin reached these quarries, determined to see the source of the red pipes he had encountered across the plains. He came despite warnings that the site was not open to outsiders, painted the quarry line and the ledge, and carried away samples of the stone. When scientists in the East examined those samples, they found the mineral was new to their catalogs, and they named it Catlinite in his honor. Catlin's paintings and writings made the quarries famous across America and Europe. Fame was a mixed gift, drawing curiosity and pressure toward a place its keepers had long protected. The stone still carries his name today. Above the falls, the trail runs beside the creek across the top of the ledge, and the whole monument spreads out around us. From up here you can read the landscape in a glance, the quarry line to the west, the prairie rolling away, the town of Pipestone at the edge of it all. The creek slides quietly over bare rock before its plunge. Wind is the loudest thing on the ledge today. It is the kind of walking that empties your head in the best way. Two years after Catlin, in the summer of 1838, the French scientist Joseph Nicolet arrived with an expedition mapping the country between the Mississippi and Missouri rivers. His party camped beside the quarries for a full week, from late June into early July, taking measurements and recording the site with scientific care. A young Army lieutenant named John Fremont, later famous as an explorer in his own right, was among them. Before leaving, members of the expedition carved their initials into the quartzite near the ledge. Nicolet's map of this region became one of the finest of its era. The carved letters remain, sharp after nearly 2 centuries. The trail passes the spot where those initials survive, protected now as one of the monument's treasures. It is a strange feeling to stand before graffiti old enough to be history. The letters mark the moment this place entered the official maps of the United States, for better and for worse. Within a generation of that carving, settlement pressed hard into this country, and the quarry's future grew uncertain. The rock records the visit without comment. The stone, as always here, outlasts the story. Near the inscription stands a lone column of quartzite called Leaping Rock, separated from the main ledge by a gap of about 6 feet. Tradition holds that young men proved their courage by leaping from the ledge onto the top of that freestanding pillar. It is said that some who made the jump left arrows planted in the rock as proof, and accounts of the feat impressed early visitors. The jump looks short until you stand at the edge and consider the drop below. Fremont himself is reported to have made the leap during the 1838 visit. The column still stands, daring nobody now, protected like everything else on this ledge. A short flight of stone steps carries the trail up through a cleft in the quartzite to an overlook above the falls. The stairs are worn smooth, edged with railings, threading between rock walls that almost touch overhead. It is the only real climb on the whole loop, over in a minute. From the top, the view runs down the line of the creek and out across the winter prairie. This is where the cliff shows its faces. Wind, water, and frost have carved the quartzite here into shapes that startle you with how human they look. One formation is called Old Stone Face, a blunt profile jutting from the cliff. Another, known as the Oracle, gazes out from the rock with brow, nose, and chin so distinct that early accounts treated it as a presence rather than an accident. Stories connected with the oracle describe it as a spirit face, and it has been pointed out to visitors for as long as visitors have come. Seen in low November light, the profiles are unmistakable. The cliff seems to watch the prairie, and you understand why people have always felt this ledge was more than rock. From the overlook, the monument arranges itself below us like a model. The creek gathers, drops white over the falls, and wanders off east through the grass. The quarry line draws its long scar through the prairie to the west. Beyond the boundary fence, farm fields run flat to the horizon in every direction. Inside the fence, prairie, in its oldest form. The contrast tells you exactly what this small monument is holding on to. By the 1850s, settlement was closing around the quarries, and the Yankton Dakota moved to protect them. In their 1858 treaty with the United States, negotiated in Washington, they gave up claim to some 11 million acres of land. But their leader, struck by the refused to sign until the treaty guaranteed his people free and unrestricted use of the red Pipestone quarry. That promise was written into the treaty, 1 square mile reserved around the quarries. The decades that followed tested it again and again, through encroachment, broken boundaries, and long court fights. The Yankton pressed their claim all the way to the United States Supreme Court, and the quarry rights survived. The trail descends from the ledge and turns back south through the prairie toward the visitor center. The wind has picked up, combing the dry grass in long silver waves. A few birds work the seed heads and nothing else moves. On a holiday afternoon in late November, we may be the only people on the entire loop. The quiet here does not feel empty. It feels attended, the way certain old churches feel between services. On August 25, 1937, President Franklin Roosevelt signed the Act of Congress that created Pipestone National Monument. The law did something rare for its time. It did not simply preserve a landscape. It wrote the quarrying rights of Native Americans into the monument's founding purpose, securing the promise first made in the treaty era. That is why the pits beside the trail are worked to this day. The National Park Service manages the ground, but the stone belongs to the tradition. Among American parklands, Pipestone stands nearly alone in protecting not just a place, but a practice. The loop closes gently, past the last of the quarry pits and back toward the low stone visitor center. Inside, cultural demonstrators shape pipestone with files and saws, and the cases display work by carvers whose families have quarried here for generations. It is worth as much time as the trail itself. Our walk has covered about a mile in a little over half an hour of easy going. Short miles, long centuries. That is the arithmetic of this place. Near the monument's southern edge rest the Three Maidens, a cluster of huge, rounded granite boulders sitting strangely on the prairie. They are glacial erratics, fragments of a single enormous boulder carried here from the north by Ice Age glaciers, and left behind when the ice melted. Granite is foreign to this quartzite country, which is part of why the stones have always commanded attention. In tradition, they are a sacred place, said to shelter spirits, and quarriers historically left offerings there before digging the red stone. Offerings are still made at Pipestone today, and visitors are asked to leave any they see undisturbed. The boulders keep their watch beside the quarries, as they have since before anyone came for the stone. In 1855, Henry Wadsworth Longfellow opened his epic poem, The Song of Hiawatha, at this very place. In its first canto, the Master of Life stands on the red crags of the quarry, calls the warring nations together, and commands them to make pipes of peace from the red stone. The poem became one of the most widely read works of its century, and it fixed the quarry in the imagination of readers around the world. Longfellow never saw this ledge himself, and his poem mixed traditions freely. But millions of readers first learned of the red pipestone through his lines. The town beside the monument even takes street names from the poem to this day. "3,000 years of quarrying, a treaty kept, a waterfall named for jealousy, and stone older than life on land, all inside one small circle of Minnesota prairie. Pipestone is proof that the deepest places are not always the biggest ones. If you come, walk slowly, stay on the trail, and remember that the pits you pass are not ruins but a living tradition at work. Few walks anywhere hold this much meaning per step. Thank you for watching. Follow for more of the trails of the world."